Let me start. We'll be talking about elicitation techniques. So ways to elicit requirements. And there are several of those. Some of them we're already or we're becoming familiar with. So one technique is observation. Another technique is brainstorming. Brainstorming we're becoming familiar with now. We've done a brainstorming session. We'll do another one in class tomorrow. Requirement workshop is another one, right? So a workshop dedicated to gathering requirement. Your brainstorming session can be conducted in a workshop. So any meeting where you are eliciting requirement, you can basically call a workshop. Interviewing, right? Interviewing is more one-on-one, right? Chat or discussion. So it may be formal, it may be informal with someone where you are trying to get deeper insight into a particular subject matter. Surveys, right? Surveys are useful. They come in handy when you have your stakeholders widely distributed, where your stakeholders are everywhere, maybe in different places around the world, and they're in different time zones, and it's not very easy getting them in the same place. Or when you have a lot of stakeholders, when you have plenty people, right, then surveys may make sense. Surveys is where you use a questionnaire, where you already write questions, and they can be open-ended or even closed-ended questions. So you're using an instrument, a survey instrument like a questionnaire, to collect input, right, to elicit requirements from your stakeholders. Document review can be another way. So you go read up, just like document analysis. You go read up on a feature or a requirement. Interface analysis is another strategy, which we'll talk more about when we get to requirement analysis and design definition. So we won't really go into interface analysis today. But what it entails is you're just looking at sources of information, right? So where will information flow in for whatever, say, system, right? So system or solution you are developing or you are studying. So where's information flowing in from and where's information going out from, right? So what kinds of information are flowing in and going out? Right? So these are several techniques that are used to elicit requirement. Now let's dig deeper into some of them, the ones that may be new to us. Like many of us are used to surveys. You have filled a survey before. If you have bought something online or you have made a phone call to customer service, after the phone call, you may get a request to do a survey on their performance, right? So that's a survey. That's what survey is. There's no big deal about it. But again, in the requirement elicitation space, it may just be you discussing a technology they already know, right? An IT that your stakeholders already know, and you're asking them questions. Oh, so what do you like this technology? How well do you like it, right? Can you give more information here? What don't you like about the technology? So it can be open-ended questions or closed-ended questions in your survey, and use a survey instrument like SurveyMonkey, and there are many other types out there like Qualtrics, right, to do your survey and send it out. Or in some cases, some people do phone surveys. Right? Some people do phone surveys where the questions are pre-recorded and the answers will be recorded. So you just dial up your stakeholders at any time of their convenience. When they pick up, they hear automatic questions and they answer those questions and you record their responses. So let's dig deeper into specific techniques I want us to pay special attention to. One of such techniques would be interviewing. Interviewing is interacting with individual stakeholders to understand their needs and perspective about the project or change. So you're interacting with individual, and that is worth emphasizing. The goal here is they are individual stakeholders. And even though we've used individual here, it's not strange sometimes. For example, you will see cases where people maybe on the news interview a husband and wife, right? Or two partners that are involved in a specific thing together. Right? So in those cases, those people, as long as you can look at them as an individual or a very, very close-knit team where it makes sense to have maybe two of them involved, right, in the same place and ask them questions, then you could still call it an interview. But interviews are usually done with individuals, one person at a time. And again, the goal here is you want to understand their needs and perspective about the project or change. Well, adding the word perspective here because during planning, we said, during stakeholder analysis, to be specific, we said you have to analyze the attitude of your stakeholder. You have to consistently, continually analyze the attitude of your stakeholder to see if there's a change in attitude and if that change is favoring you or against you, against your project. Right? So even when you are interviewing stakeholder, you want to understand their needs, you want to understand their points of view. You also want to get a sense of their attitude towards the project. Okay? So there are two types of interviews. You have structured interviews. And what this means is you already have your questions organized before the interview starts. Right? So you have planned out question 1, question 2, question 3 to question 10, or whatever number of questions you want to ask. And then you have unstructured interviews where it's free flow based on whatever your stakeholder says, right? So you're just flowing along. You have a general topic, right? So you have a theme of for your discussion, but the questions will come out of that discussion. So you have not planned those questions before. So these are the two broad categories of interview types, structured and unstructured. Now, just for the sake of discussion, I would like to add another layer to this, that you can have a hybrid of both, right? So semi-structured interviews where you have structured some of your questions, you have planned some of the questions, but you also switch sometimes and just free flow based on what your stakeholder is saying. So you are not necessarily sticking stringently to a structure, right? So you have planned out things, but you are also open to flowing with what they are saying. Okay. So based on this explanation, which category do you think a job interview falls into? Is it structured? Is it unstructured? Or is it something else? Please unmute and answer. A job interview, do you think it's structured, unstructured, or something else, or in between?
Good evening. I think most times is in between. It's both structured, and then sometimes some questions could come from what you've said in the interview, the process of you being interviewed.
Okay. Winifred, what do you think?
I think what Laura just said is actually right. It's in between because they have questions they want to ask you, and in the process of answering the questions,
other questions.
maybe you talk about yourself, or and you say something. You've also mentioned this during the course of this lecture that you could tend to push the interviewer towards your strengths. So they ask them, okay, give us an example when you work with those organizations. What how did you resolve something? So I think it's in between. They never intended to ask that question, but based on the way you've explained and talked about it towards your strengths, they tend to ask questions from that end too. So it's in between.
Okay. Then there are types of interview question or types of questions you can ask in an interview. And we'll look at 3 types. Closed-ended questions. Those are questions that would have yes or no answers, right? That can have yes or no answers, or questions that can have 1 or 2 answers, right? So it can be either this or that. Those are closed-ended questions. Closed-ended questions will allow your interviewee give you very short responses, right? Very clear responses. And these types of questions are useful when you want statement of fact, when you want to get the fact of something. You are designing a system. For example, the fish example we showed yesterday for transition requirement. In that case, you want to know whether maybe the distance should be 7 meters, or let's say 7 centimeters or not, right? You want specific feedback. You want specific feedback. So you would ask, is the distance or should the distance be 7 meters? You expect your interviewee to say yes or no, because you don't want to leave room for variability, for uncertainty in the response. You want to be clear as possible. So if it's not 7 centimeters, then how many centimeters should it be? Open-ended questions is when you want your interviewer, you use that when you want your interviewee to speak broadly, right? You don't want yes or no answers. You want them to give you details. Okay. Some interviewees or some stakeholders may be long-winded, people that like to talk. And so having and knowing how to bring out your closed-ended questions sometimes to summarize and to clarify what they are saying is a skill. Some interviewees or some stakeholders, you ask them a question and they will just go on narrating the origin of the whole thing from Genesis to is it 1 John now? And you have to stop them quickly and say, okay, yeah, thank you. But just to clarify, is it 7 meters or not? And they say, oh, it's 7 meters. Okay, thank you. Right? Because again, time is of the essence, right? In this space, of course, you are not setting out to cut your stakeholders short, but for some questions, you may need specific responses. So having that skill to bring out your closed-ended question for clarification purposes is good. Open-ended questions is what most BAs will resolve to, is maybe the best type of question you can ask. You want your stakeholders to talk so that you can get insight into things. Right? Especially when you are using a semi-structured or unstructured interview format, because it's from what they are saying that you would ask more questions. Then we have another type of question, probing question. Who can tell me what probing question is? Or better yet, who can give me an example of a probing question? Is Tosin there? Let's see, what do we have here? Taiwo. Hello, Taiwo.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Give me an example of a probing question, please.
For example, I'll say maybe what are the pros and cons of the situation? Or like, how did you come to a conclusion? You know, questions that follow up on like a given answer and you just want a response or like something you can go on with. Sorry, my daughter is here.
No, that's fine. Okay. So yes, question that is seeking to follow up on a previous question. A question that wants to help you are using to dig deeper into something, into a response a stakeholder has given. And probing questions come in handy when you have stakeholders that are not very expressive, stakeholders that don't like to talk. Right. So again, as a BA, you remember we talked about you are using or developing information systems, and part of information systems is people. That's one of the key components. And so you have different types of people. Some people will be talking a lot, and some will be the very quiet types. So you may ask an open-ended question. Right? You may ask an open-ended question, and the person will still give you very short, close-ended answers. So in that case, you can now use your probing questions to dig deeper, to ask further questions. Okay. Please, can you shed more light on that? Can you clarify what you mean by not good? For example, you ask, what do you think about this software application, your Microsoft 365 or Office 365 application? And the person says, not good. So you're expecting them to go on a rampage and tell you how they are using it and whether, their experiences and all that. And the person just says, not good, and keeps quiet. You have to follow up with a probing question. Can you expatiate more on what you mean by not good? Is there any particular aspect of it that you're not enjoying? And then they go on and tell you more. Okay, so these are the types of questions that a BA would usually ask or use in eliciting requirements during interviews. So closed-ended questions, open-ended questions, probing questions. You need to know when to use which one and when to switch between them. So interviews are one of the very key techniques that BAs use to elicit requirements. But there are times when interviews are not the best approach to elicit requirements. There are times when interviews are terrible for eliciting requirements. And one of those times is when you're trying to build consensus. When you're trying to get agreement on or way forward on something, you can't use interviews because interviews is dealing with individuals. And you are trying to get agreement maybe from a group of people, a group of stakeholders, right? Stakeholders, in some cases, from different departments, so cross-functional teams. You can't go and interview them individually to get consensus because you may interview stakeholder A and they give you certain responses or give you certain answers that when you go to stakeholder B contradicts them and says, no, that's not how we do things. Right. And that means you have to run back to stakeholder A to say, well, stakeholder B said this and that. It's different from what you're saying. Right. So you can't build consensus that way. Right. So for now, you are still between stakeholder A and stakeholder B when you still have up to stakeholder J to deal with. Right. When you still have 8 other stakeholders, for example, to deal with. So when you need to build consensus, interview will not be the best technique. So let's look at another technique. And that technique is observation. So in this case, in observation, what you're doing is you're studying stakeholders performing their job. And what you want to do by studying them is you want to document the details of the current process. So you're studying stakeholders performing their job, and your goal is you want to document how the current process works, how they are doing their job right now. Again, there are two types of observation. You can have passive observation and active or visible observation. Passive observation or invisible observation is observation that you are doing without interrupting the stakeholder. So you are like a fly on the wall. You know, when a fly is on a wall in a room, as long as they're on the wall, they are not disturbing the people in the room. But they can hear what is going on. They can see what people are doing with their complex eyes, but they are not interrupting. So passive observation is where you play that role, where in an organization, maybe there's a process going on. Maybe you want to see how they attend to customers. And your goal is to create a system that will do what they are doing, that will automate that task. So you can be a fly on the wall. You can just hang around and see how they do it and take notes of the process. Also, they greet the customer, they collect ticket, you record it. The customer presents ticket, then they exchange, they give something out, they collect money, and they give receipt, right? You document all those processes. So you can automate the process. So passive is you are invisible, right? You are not interrupting the flow of work, but you are collecting information, right? Active is where you interrupt the flow of work. You are participating. You are actually, if possible, doing the work in order to understand the process. So you are involved with the work in order to understand the process. Okay. So one type of active observation will be apprenticing, where you become an apprentice or an intern in an organization to see how they are doing a particular sets of tasks or conducting some activities. And you can take note that way. So as a BA, you can participate in a particular task to see how it's being done, so you can learn the process. Shadowing is also another type where you follow or you stay with the person doing the task and observe how they do it. You can ask questions and you can monitor what they're doing. Okay. Now let's look at when to prefer, say, observation to interviewing, for example. Okay, so let's look at an example. Is Laura there? Is Laura there?
Yes, I just got back on.
Okay. Oh, good. So Laura, do you have a store anywhere near your house?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a roundabout anywhere near your house?
Yes.
Okay. Can you please describe to us how you get to the roundabout and the store?
From the store?
Yeah, from your house.
From my house to the store or to the roundabout?
Just pick anyone.
Okay. There's a store called Market Square. It's a grocery store, and from my house You take your right from my house, come out of my clothes, take the first turn on your right, get to the end of the road. You take another connecting street, which is called Raymond Street. You get to the end of Raymond Street. You meet a major road, which is the Sasson Road. It leads you straight to a roundabout. You go round, you take your right on the roundabout and you drive straight. You meet the store somewhere, maybe like 1 kilometer from the roundabout. The store is called the Market Square store. It's a popular store in the vicinity. You won't miss it.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. Thank you. Taiwo. Hello, is Taiwo there?
Yes, I'm here.
So Taiwo, do you know where the store is now?
I have a little bit understand, but I didn't get everything.
Oh, so if we said you should take us to the store Laura is talking about now, can you take us there?
No. No.
Andrew, do you know where the store is now?
No.
Okay.
I missed some points. I missed some of the description.
You know, when I said Laura should tell us how to get to the store, she's not even talk about whether she would drive, right, from her house, or we are taking public transport. Maybe there's a bus. So we don't even know how she gets to the store. Do you walk? Do you drive? Do you take public transport? And you know why it's that way? Because for Laura, she's so used to the way she gets to the store that for her, it's a routine task. It's something she does. It's not a big deal. She knows how she will get to the store. And in explaining it, there's no way she won't miss some points. Even if she thinks about the explanation again, the explanation she gave, she may start remembering that, oh, I didn't mention that you pass this street. She didn't even say if you need to wear slippers at all. Just get out. You didn't say anything about car or driving or bus or anything. Just take right, end of the street, and then turn. And that is how it is many times for your stakeholders, right? A task they do every time, it is very easy for them to forget details or miss part of the explanation. So if I was interviewing Laura like I just did, right, and I'm expecting to collect requirement about the process of getting to the store from her, that may not be the most effective way. Okay. In this case, it makes more sense to observe Laura, either passively or actively. Passively, if I wanted to observe Laura passively, how would I do that? Taiwo.
I would say by observing, passively. If it's passively, you can't observe without interruption. So I'm not really sure.
Okay. So who can help? How would you observe Laura passively?
By watching her or by following her behind.
Okay. Or she won't know,
Using
right?
Yeah.
She won't see you.
Yeah, using camera.
Using camera or drone to follow her and see the parts she's taking to that store.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one way to elicit the requirement. That's elicit the process of going to the store. Let's assume going to the store is the task. Right? You can elicit it that way by passively observing her going to the store. So you hide somewhere and be watching her as she leaves the house. You'll be following her, trailing her moves till she gets to the store. So you now know the address and you're documenting it. Okay, you take a ride. Oh, she jumped this gutter, or she passed this bridge or something. You take note of all that. That's how you passively observe. What if we were actively observing Laura? What would we do? Let Winifred answer this one.
Like, as in,
If you
go ahead again, please.
If you wanted to actively observe Laura going to the store, what would you do?
I would follow her, like meet with her and observe, like ask questions. How do you go to this place? She might explain to me, and I would take actively follow her there. No,
Okay.
apart from observing, I'm gonna take an action of going to the place and then asking questions that, okay, why did you take this part? Why did you take this one?
Exactly. So more than questions, for active observation, what you want to do is say, my friend, come, let's go to that your store that you like, right? Then you go together and you are taking notes. Okay, we go through this route. Okay, so we jump this gutter. Okay, so we pass this junction. Okay, right? So you take notes, right? You go with her. That's active. Passive is where you let her go, but you are following her without her knowing, right? Or even if she knows, you are not disturbing her, you are just hiding somewhere and monitoring how she's going, right? Maybe with a drone, with a camera, or you are driving, and just letting her go without talking to her. That's passive. You are invisible. You're assuming she can't see you. You are like a fly on the wall. Okay, so in this kind of case where you need to elicit requirement without what's it called, where just interviewing the person will not do because the person may not be able to describe adequately what they are doing, then it makes sense to observe the person. Dolapo, you have your hands raised.
So I wanted to say that passive observation, is it the same thing as shadowing?
When you are shadowing someone, so shadowing, really, you can use it passively where you are just looking at what they are doing. But in organizations that do shadowing, many times you will interact with the person, right? You will interact with the person, you will ask questions. So ideally, shadowing should be passive, right? Where you just monitor, you just watch what the person is doing and you learn from. But that's not how many people will use it, right? When they say shadow this person doing this job, and many times nowadays they mean not just watch what they are doing, right? But also interact with them to clarify and ask questions and all that, right? So you are beyond passively observing. You are now actively, but to a very, very low extent, right? But in ideal situations, you can shadow someone without bothering them. Now, let's look at an example where observation may not be ideal, especially active observation. When many of us are used to these police officers or traffic warden, as they're called in some parts of the world, that direct traffic, right? When a traffic warden is directing traffic, say you wanted to develop a tool, an IT right? Data, software, hardware, that is going to do something concerning traffic. Right? And you need to get information from the traffic warden about the process. Would active observation be a good idea when they are currently directing traffic? Taiwo, what do you think? So you have a traffic warden presently directing traffic. Kids are crossing the road and the traffic warden is saying stop, is directing traffic. Will active observation be a good idea in this place? Where you as the BA would actively get involved with their process.
No, I would say that's passive.
Why no?
Because you can't tell them, that you can't tell them how to do their job. So you're basically observing from afar where you are. You could be in the car, you could be anywhere.
Okay. Is Tosin there? I guess not. Laura, what do you think?
I think it's a passive one.
Okay.
Okay, Tosin said he thinks it's passive. Laura, what do you think?
I also think it's passive. It should be passive.
Why?
Because
it's passive because okay.
At that moment, if you interrupt him, you could confuse him because already on the job, and he needs to concentrate so that he doesn't confuse the drivers and the pedestrians. So I think you need to just observe him from the side so that you don't distract or confuse him.
Okay. Tosin. Hello, Tosin, you were going to say something.
Yeah, just the same thing that Laura said. Because of the nature of what you're trying to observe, it's better that what is being done requires active or requires rapt attention or the concentration of performing the task to get it done. And as a matter of fact, even learn more by watching passively, because if I'm gonna go by the question you're asking exclusively, now saying it's not a strict question, by observing you can actually better understand how to improve the system because you can see all of the movement and where the lapses are and where the police or the police warden or the traffic director is not doing the right thing or is not doing it as efficiently as possible. So in a case like that, watching passively might actually give you better understanding than when it's than you being active. The flip side to that now would be that when, for example, that traffic warden now gets off the job, you can now begin actively asking them questions about the things that you've seen, and they can begin to sort of like an interview to understand the actions that they were taking while you were passively watching them, and they can probably give you an insight into why those actions were, and then you can maybe point out the lapses you saw or the inefficiencies you saw in what they were trying to do.
Okay. So, yes, in this instance, it makes sense to passively observe the stakeholder. And the reason is you don't want to interrupt, you don't want to get in the way of what they are doing, right? Especially when what they are doing is time sensitive or there's a significant amount of risk involved. So you want to make sure you are observing them passively rather than interrupting their process. So yes, you are correct. Okay, so we understand these techniques now. We understand interviewing and when interviewing makes sense and when it doesn't make sense to interview people. We understand observation and we understand the different types of observation, passive and active, and when it makes sense to use one or the other. Now let's move forward. Brainstorming is another one. Right, so it's another technique. And this is something we've used. We used it last week, I believe, to do a task. So let's look at brainstorming. So for brainstorming, your goal is to use the creative power of a group to solve a problem or resolve an issue. Brainstorming is about using the group's creative power, and I'm emphasizing groups here. Everyone's creative power. Everyone has different life experiences, different knowledge levels, different exposures to certain subject areas or subject matter. And you want to use that. Sometimes it is advantageous to not know so much about something. Right? Sometimes it is advantageous. It is beneficial when you are not a domain expert, when you don't know one domain very, very well. Why is it beneficial? Because you bring fresh eyes to the issue. You bring fresh eyes. So let me quickly, while talking about brainstorming and why on this topic of fresh eyes, let me quickly touch on how that can be relevant during an interview. So an interviewer asks you, oh, so you don't have, you don't have background in insurance. Maybe you applied for an insurance job and nothing on your CV says you have any experience in insurance. You say, well, that is an advantage. Number one, I'm a quick study. I'm a very quick learner. You can see from my past experiences, I've excelled a lot, learning different domains and doing very, very well in those domains. You can see I was awarded best staff in this domain, even though my education and experience was different from that domain. I learned it quickly and did well. So to this, your new domain, this insurance, which is new to me, I'll be bringing fresh eyes, meaning I'll be asking questions that other people will not even think to ask because I'm new to the domain. I'll be bringing fresh eyes. I will see things other people will not see because they are too close. So I may actually be an asset. I believe I'll be an asset to your organization, to be wise for you to employ me. Because I'm new, because I don't have experience in that domain, so I can see things, and I'm bringing my wealth of business analysis experience with me. I can ask questions, I can see things, I can probe into things that other people will assume and overlook without knowing they are assuming and overlooking. So you can turn that to an advantage. So back to the topic we're discussing, brainstorming. Brainstorming, you want to use the power of a group to solve problem or resolve an issue. The group, not one person. Now, brainstorming is intended to produce what? Broad and diverse sets of options. You are brainstorming because you want to get plenty ideas, different types. Again, because you have different people in the brainstorming session, different stakeholders who have different experiences, different exposures, different knowledge sets and all that, different skill sets and all that. So you are brainstorming because you want to generate broad and diverse sets of options. Now, the key rule of brainstorming, which I think Shegun tried to drum into your ears when you were brainstorming the last time, is You do not debate ideas during brainstorming session. You do not, as a rule, debate anybody's ideas. You want to gather all the ideas first, not start saying, oh, this one doesn't know this. Why do we want to do this? So essentially, you don't want to criticize any idea. Because you see, next to a not so good idea, right? Just right next to it may be a very, very good idea, very, very special idea. But once you criticize this not so good idea, the person may just assume that, okay, that means you won't like the special idea and they won't share it. Okay. It may not even be that person. It may not be the person that shared the not so good idea that will keep quiet. It may be someone else, maybe a gentle person, a gentle stakeholder. Maybe once they see that you say somebody's idea is not good, they will just think, okay, that means my idea too, that my idea will not be smart. Let me just keep quiet. My idea is closely related to what this other person said that you said is not good. The person talked about yellow. And my idea also is that we should create yellow billboards for our telecoms company and do something and do that. And since that person talked about yellow vest and you said it's not good because it's expensive, that means you won't like the idea of yellow. Let me just keep quiet. There's yellow in both. And you want to prevent that as the BA. You want to prevent that. So what you want to do instead is let everybody talk with the great ideas, with the not so great ideas. You want to gather everything. You want to encourage everybody to pour out these ideas. You want more ideas, more ideas. And then when you have all those ideas, then as a group, you can now start. You would already predefine a criteria that you want to use to judge ideas. So if it's cost, if it's whatever criteria you want, you now start using that to rank the ideas, to filter the ideas. So let's look at the process. The first thing in brainstorming is you define an area of interest, right? So what topic are we even discussing in this brainstorming session? Then you determine the time limit. How long will the brainstorming session take, right? So, and all this, you are doing all this in your preparatory stage before you start brainstorming. So you've determined the area of interest. You have determined how long it will take, maybe 1 hour. It's usually good to bring snacks, food, chocolate, something. Sugar helps people talk. So it's good to bring sugar. Identify your stakeholders that will participate in the brainstorming session. Now, you should establish your evaluation criteria. So when these stakeholders come and they bring their ideas, how would you choose the best idea? How would you choose the great ideas? You should already establish that criteria. Not after they have given you ideas, you now start saying, well, you now start coming up with rules on the fly. That will seem unfair. That will seem like you have not planned well. So you should already have an idea based on the requirements, based on the business requirements or stakeholder requirements, or especially the business requirements in this case, right? You know the business need, you know the scope. So you know what is acceptable, what will not work for a solution, and all those things you know. So you want to create evaluation criteria. What will make sense for this particular area of interest for us? What will be acceptable to us? So after you do your preparation, you have planned, the next phase is the actual session where you allow people share their ideas. Free flow of ideas is what is the hallmark of a good brainstorming session. Free flow of ideas. Let the ideas flow. You want to be strategic. You want to, if you have a big group, for example, you want to divide the task. Maybe you have subtasks, right? You want to functionally decompose it, divide it to the big group, and so that they have smaller groups to brainstorm on each of the subtasks. right? So when I've had brainstorming session where we have 25 people, 30 people, will divide into smaller groups. So you give everybody the chance to really talk and brainstorm on those subtasks. Then they bring their overall solutions, right? Their ideas to the bigger group. And then we look at it together and rank it. And that will give other people a chance to even chip in new ideas. But in a small session, right? One group, share ideas. Let ideas be shared freely, free flow. Free flow, very important. Don't critique ideas. That will affect the free flow. Don't debate ideas or critique them to affect the free flow. Record these ideas. So if you have a board, if you have a Google Docs, if you are using Confluence, any of those tools, you're immediately recording ideas, documenting all the ideas. Build on each idea. So when somebody presents an idea, you can say, oh, does anyone have any other thing similar to this, or building on this, or does anyone want to add to this? Right? So you're building on ideas. Again, you want to elicit as many as possible. Then the last part of a brainstorming session, you see brainstorming is easy, right? So you prepare, you know the area of interest, you know the time, you identify participants, you establish criteria, then you do the brainstorming itself. Then you wrap up. This is where you now discuss and evaluate the ideas. So you now go back to the, so the first part, you are not discussing the ideas, you are just collecting the ideas. You now go back and start, okay, so this idea, who shared this idea? Or if you can even record the stakeholder that shared the idea as an idea attribute. So who shared? Can you explain this further? Okay, so what do we think? Do we all agree with this? Based on this criteria, does this idea fit in to what we want? So you create a list of ideas that, of the ideas that go with your this thing criteria. Then you rate the ideas. Maybe you can't implement all of them. Use the group to rate the ideas. So which one do we think is the best? Which one should we do first? Which one is second? Which one is the third? And all that. Maybe you only need 5. Then you distribute the final list to your stakeholders. So that's how you do brainstorming. You prepare. So you already determine the time it will take. You know your stakeholders. You've identified them in your in your planning phase. But for a particular activity, you may need to even refine that list some more. Right? Maybe not all your stakeholders will be useful in this particular brainstorming session. Maybe not all of them have the knowledge you need. Right. So you may need to look at that list and identify the relevant stakeholders for this particular activity. And you establish an evaluation criteria based on the business need you have collected, based on your business requirement. So how would we evaluate these ideas? What will make sense for us? And then you conduct the session, and then you just wrap up. Wrap up is where you now start discussing and evaluating the ideas, where you create a list of the ideas that are in line with the business need. The other ones that are out of scope, you can put them in your parking lot. Right? So you have still noted them down, but you put them in because you noted them down here, right? But you put them in parking lot. It may be something you go and revisit later. They may be useful for another season, maybe not now. Then you now rate those ideas and you distribute the final list. There are variations of brainstorming that allow you or allow participants to be anonymous. So that's just for you to know that you can, for whatever reason in your organization, you can decide to do a brainstorming session where participants are anonymous. maybe where you feel that when you look at the culture of the organization, where you feel that people may receive pushback, or some people may be offended if other people say they don't like something, then you may want to organize a brainstorming session where participants are anonymous, or where they can provide anonymous feedback. So we don't know who said what. In that case, you can say they should write down what they are thinking and not put their names. Okay? Or you can organize something online using a platform that will allow anonymity. So you have to look at the culture of the environment. If not, you will invite stakeholders and everybody will just be saying what the organization wants them to say when there's no anonymity. Okay, so that's on you to look at how sensitive what you are working on is. Right. So let's look at some tools you can use during brainstorming sessions and workshops. Prototyping is one tool you can use. All right. Now I call this prototyping or prototypes, but there are actually three different types of tools here that I'm grouping into one. So the first type of tool is your wireframe. Wireframes are low fidelity representation of the user interface design idea. Low fidelity representation of the user interface design idea. First, what is a user interface? User interface is what the user uses to communicate with technology. Right. So the outlet, usually it's an interface, so a form, if you are dealing with software, right? So it's a form or a window, something like that, that you use to communicate, that you use to provide information or receive information from IT. So that is your user interface. Is a way in which technology can communicate with you, human beings. Okay. So that this interface is usually designed by someone, by a designer or a developer. So a programmer will design the interface. Right. So computer communicating with computer does not need browser, does not need a window or a form. Right? Computers can communicate with each other through APIs, through messaging, through different things, and not the type of message that we send. Some other coded level messages, low level messages. But interface is what we can see as users and interact with to communicate with IT, with computers. Right, so with a software or with a hardware. So interface for your ATM machine will be that thing you are using to type your amount in and press and withdraw or deposit or do something, right? Communicate with the machine, even though the ATM is hardware run by software, right? So you communicate with the ATM through the interface, through the user interface. Your phone, right? When you open an app, you have a user interface. It's called UI for short. When you do software, anybody who goes to do research on software will learn about all this in case any of us is not familiar with it. Right. So during prototyping, as I've categorized it here, or during requirement elicitation, you may want to create a low fidelity example of an interface. This is an example of low fidelity. What I'm drawing here is an example of low fidelity. You may say, okay, so this application we're developing, should the person's picture be here? And then there should be a username box here, text box, and password text box here, and a button for submit. You see how I drew it? You can draw something like this, and this is called a wireframe. You can draw it with computer, So you can draw it with technology, right? And there are apps that would help you draw this, and we'll look into those when we get to requirements, analysis, and design definition. Or you can draw it with your biro and paper, or pen and or pencil. Okay, so you can draw it like this with your pen and pencil. That's why it's called low fidelity, meaning it's not really fully representing how the user interface, the eventual user interface will look like. It's just a sketch. So it's low fidelity. So low fidelity representations are called wireframes. Now, some people take it a step further and do medium fidelity representation, which is your mockup. So they will use a software to create something that will look like what the eventual interface will look like. Now, look at this interface, the wireframe, for example. You see it has home, notification, profile, settings, right? It was drawn with the software. This you can draw with pencil and paper and ruler. You can do something like that and shade all these places. All these could be shadings, right? Now, this is giving your stakeholders an idea of how the application will look like, the interface of the application will look like, what it will look like. So this is your low fidelity. See the medium one, it looks like the real thing. It looks like what the application will look like, but it doesn't contain any feature. It does not do all these things, will not work. My address, if you click it, is just a picture, right? So you have a better picture, but nothing is working, no functionality. A better picture of the eventual user interface, but no functionality. So that's a mock-up. Rich picture, medium fidelity. Then you have the highest fidelity, which is your prototype. So a prototype is actually like the real thing with some functionality. So the difference between the prototype and the real thing is that the prototype may not have all the functionalities, but it will at least have some. Right? So it's possible that if you click this, it works. You see they can even put pictures already. You see in the mock-up, right? It shows how it will look, but you can't use any of this. It's just telling you that here you add picture, right? You add an avatar here, but you can't use it. If you click, it's not working, nothing works. But here you can already add picture. You can already see it working on the phone if possible. Okay? You can already see it installed on the mobile device we want to use it on. But maybe not all the functionalities will be operational for now. So it's still a prototype. So you can use this as tools to elicit requirements from your stakeholders. How? Now, it's easier for your stakeholders to talk and give advice when they can see pictures, when they can see representation. So you can create a prototype like this, like a wireframe or a mock-up, and present it to your stakeholders when you're eliciting requirement, maybe in your brainstorming session, and they can share details. Oh, yeah, we don't want the picture to be up here. It will be better if it's here. No, we don't want my cars. We are not doing this thing anymore. We have changed that. A new regulation has come out. Or we want something else, right? So they can give you advice, right, based on the prototype. So you can use these prototypes, either a wireframe, a mock-up, or an actual prototype, to elicit requirements. Sorry, was someone saying something? Okay. Then another tool you can use during your elicitation workshops or for elicitation. So either a brainstorming session, even a focus group, any of those things. Another tool you can use is storyboarding. So this is usually even very, very effective when you are trying to represent a process of something. Like the storyboard I used when we're talking about experts and novices. I created a storyboard and I said, fill in the stories. What do you think is happening? So you can do something like that. And this is one of such, where we show scene 1, scene 2 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Right? And you can now use these to elicit requirements from your stakeholders. So let's start from our customer, our potential customer is doing this, maybe is walking on the street, brings out their mobile phone, they can see blah, blah, blah. And you use that and say, so what do you think they should see here? And then the stakeholders will say, yes, no, this is not how it works. When for our customer, potential customers to use our app, they can't use it when they're on the road, right? We want them to use it at home because it's movies we will show them first. So we want them to be somewhere indoors to use it, not outdoors, right? They can start shedding light. Oh, no. This is not how we want it to work. This is how we want it to work. Then you start taking notes. Okay. So here it should be indoors. Okay. So we're expecting that they'll be indoors. Okay. Then how will the features of the app be listed? Then they'll tell you. You say, oh, okay. So you can take notes here. Then what happens next, right? So they are connecting the stories and telling you if you got it right, if you are getting the flow right, or if not. So in this case, you are representing your own conceptualization, your own view of their process, so that they can either correct it or fill in the blanks for you. And you are using that to get requirements, to elicit requirements. So a storyboard is another tool you can use when eliciting requirements. You can use this in a brainstorming session like we did in class. You can use this in a focus group or any of those avenues. So we've talked about brainstorming sessions, focus, we mentioned observation, we mentioned interviewing. Now let's talk about workshops. What is a workshop? A workshop is a focused event attended by key stakeholders and subject matter experts for a concentrated period of time. Yeah. So a workshop may be held for different purposes, including planning. You can hold a workshop to plan, to analyze. So it can even be just your group of BAs, your team of BAs planning. That's a workshop. You can analyze. You can hold a workshop to design something, like the storyboarding, for example, can help you in your design, or even this user interface. So you get everybody's input in the design. Oh, no, this should not be blue. Our logo should be showing in the background here. No, we don't want any of this. This text should be red, right? So you are co-designing with your stakeholders the application or the software. So a workshop can be used for design. It can be used for scoping, which is creating boundaries, right, for your solution. It can be used to elicit requirements, which is what we're talking about right now. It can be used for modeling. Right? So you are trying to model your understanding of their process. You can be doing that in front of your stakeholders so that they can go along and say, no, this is not how the process should be. This is how it should be. And it can be used for any combination of this. So you can be doing modeling and requirement elicitation at the same time. You can use it for planning and analysis. It can be a combination of as many as possible. So a workshop may be used to generate ideas for new features or products. It can be used to reach consensus on a topic, to review requirements or designs. A workshop may be used to generate ideas. So brainstorming session is a workshop. So when you are organizing a brainstorming session, what you're doing is you're organizing a workshop to generate ideas, to brainstorm. So workshops help you bring your stakeholders together in order to collaborate on achieving a predefined goal. So the goal has to be predefined, predetermined. It's not in the workshop that we'll start saying, why are we here? Right? What are we even doing here? Right. So you would have come up with something you want to address in the workshop. So techniques for workshop: physical gathering, modeling and presenting information using tools. Like these tools I've shown you, prototypes, storyboards, right, can be used to present information to help workshop participants see this information. So you see brainstorming, rich pictures. Your rich picture will be like your storyboards, your mock-up, your prototypes, right? So you can use, you can do brainstorming, storyboards, rich pictures, SWOT analysis. You can do that during your workshop. And we talked about that. Said, in fact, that's where you do your SWOT analysis, right? Grouping and diagramming. Right? So these are the things you can do in a workshop. The benefits of workshops include quick, high quality decision making. Quick, high quality decision making. If you want quick decision making, workshops are very good for those, because everybody that should be involved in decision making is there. So no story of, oh, I sent a memo to you last week, we didn't get it. 3 weeks ago, we'll set up a meeting, all those things, right? Everybody that should make decision is there. So workshop is very good for quick decision making, high quality decision making. So we can discuss whatever we need to discuss. Workshops would help you get greater buy-in from all stakeholders. They are involved. They're involved in the process of developing the solution, right? So because they are there and they are holding each other accountable, sort of, right? The CEO maybe is part of your stakeholder, is sitting there as with the junior staff. The junior staff will not want to mess up in front of CEO. CEO doesn't want to mess up in front of the junior staffs, right? So everybody's holding each other accountable, sort of. So it creates this and enables this great buying where everybody's invested. They want to give their best, so they will support your solution even more. It builds team spirit, togetherness. It builds consensus, right? So if there's any disagreement, we can resolve it there in the workshop. And so we end up agreeing on the solution, at least to a large extent. It helps us clarify issues. So these are the benefits of workshops: clarifying issues, building consensus, building team spirit, greater buy-in from all stakeholders, rapid, high-quality decision-making. Okay. So now let's see an example of how to lead this kind of meetings, how to hold a workshop or run a meeting in general. Okay. So rather than meeting, please, in your CVs, put workshop. No one cares if you can hold a meeting. Everybody holds a meeting. But if you say, I can lead a workshop, I can hold a workshop, that's a skill. So let's learn how to do it. So please take note of the guidance that you get from this video.
How to run a meeting. Hello and welcome to VideoJug. Meetings can be an incredibly productive way of making decisions, planning for the future, or communicating to a group of people at once. We took this advice from Sean McFeet of mtd.co.uk to show you how to run an effective meeting. Step 1. Preparation. First, establish why you need to hold the meeting. What are your aims? What do you need the meeting to achieve? Make a list of your targets for the meeting and write an agenda of the items you need to tackle during your time together. It's a good idea to send this out to your colleagues beforehand so they know what to expect. Step 2. A facilitator. An effective meeting needs someone to act as referee. They are there to keep the meeting on track and make sure everyone's sticking to the agenda. Ideally, they should be impartial. If this can't be you, rope in a colleague. It could be anyone. Step 3. Room layout. Make sure that everyone can see everyone else and choose a layout that doesn't reinforce hierarchy. Everyone should feel able to speak freely. A U-shape arrangement is perfect with the facilitator at the gap in the U. Step 4. Timing. If you schedule your meeting to begin on the hour, the chances are people will drift in, grab a coffee, have a chat, eat a biscuit, compare plans for the weekend, and generally bunk off for at least 10 minutes before you're able to begin. Instead, schedule it for an off-hour time, say 10 past 2 instead of 2 o'clock. This simple psychological trick will encourage punctuality and means you can start on time. You should also have an enforced cut-off point to close the meeting. This will reduce dithering and keep you on track. Step 5. Icebreaker. If some members of the group haven't met, run through some group introductions. Go around the group and get people to introduce themselves with who they are, what they do, and something silly to help break the ice. Embarrassing stories are always good for this. Get everyone to say the first record they ever bought, or their favourite guilty pleasure.
And my guilty pleasure is taxidermy.
Step 6. The hanger. You have a definite purpose for your meeting, but pesky free-thinking individuals that they are, your employees will want to talk about things that aren't on your agenda. Have a separate piece of paper available where you can write down and store off-topic ideas for discussion later. This will help people feel they've been listened to while keeping the meeting on task. Step 7. The 5-minute bell. There's always one who's tempted to talk and talk and talk at great length about their pet subject while you want to give everyone the chance to speak. Give permission for anyone to call time on anyone else who speaks for more than 5 minutes. Bring a bell into the meeting, position it at the front of the room and encourage people to ring it if the old moaner or anyone goes on for too long. Step 8. Minutes. During the meeting, you should have someone taking notes on what's been discussed and agreed. Once the meeting is over, have someone write these up. They should then email them to everyone so that people know what they've said has been recorded. Also, keep people informed of the outcome of the meeting and what action has been taken on the decisions you made. Congratulations, you're now a meetings master. No more biscuit-eating, coffee-swilling, time-wasting for you. Ah well.
Okay. So what did we get out of that quick video on how to host a workshop?
I think in general, for a workshop, you should plan it, and it should be planned, meaning it should be structured, and the setting should be planned, and there should be no hierarchy, and it lists a lot of things that need to be done. So, but I'm not going to list all of them. So the basic thing, planning, make sure that at the end of the meeting, there's a minute and there's a time frame to put, to take this action. And I think that's just the general thing I can just say. But there are other things like the agenda, the icebreaker. Thank you.
Okay, good. Wale, what did you get from this quick video on how to host a workshop?
Yeah, so in addition to what Andrew said, leading to during the meeting, have delegates roles to individuals. So delegate the timekeeper, delegate someone that's going to be writing down, that's going to be jotting down the key subjects or the things that was discussed in the meeting, and also listen to everybody, get people's opinion across the table. And from what I got, in addition to Andrew's, I feel like once you are able to get all those information in the meeting, and you're able to get people to actually write things down and get a timekeeper, you will be able to get a good understanding of the meeting and a good results at the end of the meeting. So you won't just sit around just, talking without getting to a point. Sorry for my blabbing. I think that's what I got.
Okay, so good takeaways. Laura, what did you get from this video?
Okay, just to add to what Wale and Oga Andrew have said, I think that a workshop needs to be organized. I might be repeating some things you've said, but from the onset, you need to plan an agenda for the workshop. And you need to have a facilitator, someone that can, call people to order in the meeting so that everybody doesn't just talk at the same time. It needs to be timed. Everyone should be given an opportunity to, say something in the meeting, especially if they have something to say. I think that's all I can remember.
Okay, so good. You should take notes or get someone to take notes for you. Arrange your room to remove hierarchy. So as they advised, maybe a U-shaped arrangement where the BA sits in the opening in the U, so they can see everyone and everyone can see every other person. Use a timekeeper. And we've talked about other approaches where you can say passing the ball or passing the stick, so that whoever has the stick has the floor. And other people, once they pass the stick, other people can talk too. So everyone gets a chance to talk. But a corollary to that is the idea of timekeeping, right? Because even if you use a stick approach, someone may hug the stick or hug the ball and keep talking. So again, have timekeepers or allow people ring the bell like shown in this example, right? And so these are some of the key things you should be cognizant of when hosting a workshop. You want everyone to be able to share their thoughts, okay? And you don't want any artificial boundaries created by someone else, another participant, okay? Moving on. So after you have elicited requirements, the next step is to confirm the results of your elicitation. You have collected requirements from people, from stakeholders. You need to confirm those requirements. So confirming elicitation result just means you are checking the information gathered during an elicitation session for accuracy and consistency with other information. You've gathered information from different stakeholders. You want to check if it's accurate, and you want to see if it's consistent with other information you have. It may be other information you've gotten from other stakeholders, or information from a resource that you have done document analysis on. You want to see the information this stakeholder is giving me, does it align with what this resource is saying, right? So that's confirming elicitation result. If elicited requirement, you must confirm the requirements. So you go back to the stakeholders that gave you those requirements to confirm that what you documented is indeed what they said or what they had in mind. And then you also want to check that it's consistent with other resources, maybe in the organization or other respectable resources. Okay. How do you do that? You do that using document analysis. You can interview the stakeholders right? When you are confirming, you can do reviews. Okay, you can do review of the requirements. You can do workshops. So you can hold another workshop to confirm all the requirements. Say you collected requirements from a department, you can hold another workshop to say, okay, these are all the things I got. Please look at it. Are they in line? Are we missing anything? Right? Are they exactly the way you want it to be? And people will chip in, right? So these are some techniques that you can use to confirm elicitation results. After you've confirmed the elicitation results, the next step is just to communicate the business analysis information. So communicate all the things you have elicited, right? The BAI. You want to communicate that to the stakeholders. So in this case, what you are striving for is to ensure that your stakeholders have a shared understanding of the business analysis information. Right? So you've collected requirements from all these stakeholders. You have confirmed those requirements that this is what we want to do. Then you may send an email, right? Or do a presentation to let everybody know that, okay, this is what we have agreed to do. Right? This is what we have confirmed that you want us to do. So everybody should know. Say you had different elicitation sessions, and for some sessions, some stakeholders attended and they didn't attend others. This stage where you communicate results will make sure everybody is on the same page. Again, techniques you can use to do these: interviews, review sessions, workshops. Okay. So you can host workshops where you do reviews, you can do interviews. Okay. Are we for time? So this is the last thing we'll be discussing tonight, which is a step further from eliciting requirements. You have elicited requirements, you have confirmed the requirements, you have communicated the results, but you need to manage your stakeholders, right? You need to continue to manage them. And that's collaboration. You need to continue to work with them, right? So managing stakeholder collaboration is just encouraging stakeholders to continue to work towards a common goal. This is something you continue to do. It's an ongoing activity, right? So because there may be issues that you have not envisaged that will arise even during development. Maybe something you thought could be done in a certain way cannot be done that way. You will need to go back to these same stakeholders to inform them, to update them, and get their approval or consensus. So managing, keeping them engaged in your project, like we talked about when we saw the stakeholder matrix, right? The power interest grid. Officially, it's called stakeholder matrix or power interest grid, right? So when we saw this stakeholder matrix where we talked about 1, 2, 3, 4 people that are engaged and interested in your project, that have power, and people that don't have power and don't have interest, and we looked at all these categories. You want to use that stakeholder matrix to continue to identify your stakeholders and continue to encourage them. Give them updates about your project, keep them informed so that they can continue to be engaged with your project. That's how you collaborate with your stakeholder after you have collected requirements from them. So you want to gain agreements on commitments. You want to monitor their interests, right, and engagement. You want them to continue to work with you until the project is delivered and even beyond that. Techniques you can use to achieve these collaborative games. So role plays, games that would get them to see how things happen and how some things affect other things, right? And we can talk about that some more later. Lesson learned, giving them updates on lesson learned. Risk analysis and management, right, is one technique that will be useful here, where if a stakeholder is not responding well, you document it and you bring it up in meetings, right? That there's an issue here that maybe you need support on. Maybe a certain stakeholder is not disposed, is not, does not have time to attend to some things you need, right? And may affect your project. So you bring it up so that other stakeholders may suggest a way out. Maybe they will recommend another stakeholder to help you, right? So your stakeholder list and map and personas, like I said, your stakeholder matrix, your RACI matrix, your map, and we'll talk about personas later, right? All these things can help you in identifying how to work with your stakeholders. Elicitation and collaboration, right? The whole goal of this knowledge area is you're able to derive requirements, you're able to collect requirements from your stakeholder, and you're able to continuously engage them. Right? Continuously engage them till your project is delivered and after, even after that. Okay. So tomorrow we'll have an exercise. There'll be a case study where you'll be asked to identify missing functions, unsatisfactory performance, and excessive cost of operations. So when we come to class tomorrow, we'll do a brainstorming session. Winifred will be leading tomorrow's brainstorming session. Good night, everyone. Any question?
Yes. Why me now?
That's the. Let me stop this.
Let's learn from others.